Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Welcome to Talking Tactics, a podcast that gets you results. Each episode features a single tactic, implemented with limited resources, that move the needle in some way. I'm your host, Day Kibbles, Vice President of Strategy at Ology, a marketing and branding agency for education. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the most clever folks in higher ed worldwide, doing the work day to day, just like you. Talking Tactics is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Check them out at element451.com. Hello, friends and listeners out there. I hope this podcast episode finds you well. I'm making jokes because I always say that we should not use that line in emails, but no one has told me I can't use it on a podcast intro. And today's episode is actually about email, so I feel like it's fitting. I'm joined today by Alixandra Nozzolillo, Director of Communications at Harvard College, who is going to share how they simplified their email strategy to current students and now see a consistent 80 to 90% open rate on their weekly news email. You heard that right. Over 80% open rate by current students. There's some magic going on here. Alix has been in communications, marketing, and research for 20 years and at Harvard for 10 years. You can read her bio in the show notes. It's really interesting, but there are two very cool awards that she's won that I do want to mention here. The first is the University of Washington's Outstanding Early Career Award, which recognized her commitment to communications and the public good. And I just love that because if we're not doing comms for the public good, what are we doing it for? And the second, she's an award-winning gardener. We have to hear more about that, Alix. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Day. I'm thrilled to be speaking with you today.
Please talk to us about this gardening award. How does one get a gardening award?
So this gardening award was for my garlic. So every year I do a garlic crop. I am a huge gardener. And I think the real question should be, how does a city girl from Seattle end up at the Marshfield Fair 20 years later, with a first place blue ribbon?
Garlic? It's a garlic award? This is even better.
I love garlic. I grow many crops. My butternut squash are almost ready. And we're going to cure those for, the upcoming holidays like Thanksgiving. But garlic is a really special crop because it grows over the winter, and visit my LinkedIn. You'll see my post about all of the wonderful things that garlic teaches us. But I love that it grows over the winter, and you can't do much gardening over the winter. So it's a really great crop. But the Marshfield, it's in southeastern Massachusetts. It's the Marshfield Horticultural and Agricultural Society. And every year they have this fair. Over 150,000 people show up. It's over 150 years old. It's just a really fun group to be a part of. And this was my first year joining. I usually just save the garlic for myself, but I wanted to be a part of a community.
Wait, you first year and you won first place?
Yes.
Garlic? What
yes,
an achievement.
Thank you. I think it just goes to speak that you can do anything at any age. And if you really care about something and are interested in it, you can just learn and start to grow yourself.
Do it. Take us to when this tactic was first created. What were you trying to improve or solve in the situation that you were in?
Absolutely. I feel like we need to feed the flux capacitor and go back to the future of pre-pandemic 2019 here. So we'll go back to 2019.
Okay.
We'll go back to sort of, that summer and spring before the world went wild, I was relatively new at the college, at Harvard College. I'd been there for, a year or so. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you need to spend sort of a year in a place to sort of understand and do a listening tour
Mm-hmm.
and figure out what's working, what's not working. And one of the biggest problems we had was just divided attention, too many
Mm-hmm.
emails. Our community was overstimulated, overwhelmed. And also at the time, like, and I think this is even more true today with TikTok, we
Mm-hmm.
have this like too long didn't read mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
140 characters works better. And so we were really missing that clarity, simplicity, and I think worst of all, it was time consuming.
Oh man, I'm not going to say the quote properly, but it's the idea that restriction or limits or whatever really foster creativity. I think that's what makes the 140 character thing so powerful, because we actually have to be so much better at
Mm-hmm.
getting our point across than just writing it all, right? So, okay,
Absolutely.
too many emails, too TLDR. What did you do?
So I started with this sort of, I'm usually a big like collaborator. So I usually ask people what do they think and what's happening. But I just had this like moment of inspiration, maybe while I was out gardening at some level. But, this initial concept. And I said, gosh, what if we could simplify our communication, not only administratively, spend less time on
Mm-hmm.
individual emails, but also, what if our audience got sort of one major email for us, or,
Mm-hmm.
this single point of truth in the time where I think that fake news was just starting to pop up. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
Harvard in particular is targeted with these sort of things. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of interested about what is this point of truth? What is this trustworthy source? And then how
Mm-hmm.
to focus in on attention. And that was really where this idea started from.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. And like, what a service to your audience, right? It's the idea, the fact that you're thinking about reducing noise and being a trusted source for them is already winning, in my opinion.
Can I just say that it also might have been my laziness in that I was sick of doing so many separate emails? Because, as you know from
Yeah.
email, it is
Yeah.
very nerve wracking. Every time you click a button and
Every
you
single
send to
time.
7,000 students, if there's a typo, it is, I mean, it's not the end of the world. We're not like curing people here of some horribleness. But, like, I think that at the end of the day, it's stressful. You miss a period in an email and you perseverate and ruminate about it for days because you could have caught it. And so I think for me, just that maybe it's not laziness, maybe it's working smarter. Let's
It
flip the
is. It
script on
is
that one.
working
Working
smarter, not
smarter.
harder. Like, I've done a similar thing in my actual campus career, where I inherited a team, and then we implemented a CRM, and we took over the communications for all campuses. And all of a sudden we had to do like 600 event invitations or something for one open house,
Wow.
like for the summer open houses. And I was like, that's a hard no. First of all, this is horrible for the audience, but we're a team of 3. So I'm all for like work smart, work less, and better
Yeah.
results.
Yeah,
So,
actually, my high ed web, I actually did a poster session for high ed web this year that's coming out in the coming weeks at high ed web, and it's all about having these boundaries and about illuminating them.
oh,
So that is so important that you did that. Critical.
yeah, same. Okay, talk to us about the idea then. What did you
So
come up
yeah,
with to solve this TLDR too much situation?
so I hope you're gonna love this. This is a bit of an odd story. As you'll see in my bio, I have a degree in science. My master's is in science, which is probably why I love gardening. But I I am a scientist at heart, and so I approach these things pretty analytically. Although I do have my creative side too. But
Hmm.
I read scientific journals from time to time because I just kind of like to keep up
I
on
mean,
literature.
why
And I
not? Why not?
right, I mean, everybody wants to read Nature and other really fascinating pieces when they're relaxing. Um, so I came across this random article, and it was about emergency room physicians and alarm fatigue in medical settings.
Mm,
And I thought, wow, this sounds really similar. I mean, we're not like, it's the obvious fact that we're not typically like in life threatening conditions where you miss a signal in the ER and a patient has a horrible outcome.
right,
We're not there.
right.
But um, but I think that the insight into how this constant bombardment with information leads our minds into tuning out and this desensitization. So that was something that I immediately,
Hmm.
it just clicked, and I found that it translated to the email and communication
Hmm.
sphere too. And so it was a bit of an unconventional translation, but I like got really excited. I printed out the article and I tried to look from this research perspective, how like what they did for alarm fatigue, and then translated it into what we wanted to do for blips and bleeps and all those things that they see in the ER.
This is the coolest. What a cool origin story. What
Thank
do they
you.
do for alarm fatigue?
So they funnel it better and they have different noises. And I think ultimately,
Ah,
really the journal article didn't go too deeply into that, but it was more about this is a problem that we should solve it. More current research talks about making them sound differently, sort of like if there's a small blip versus the big beep versus the
right.
code. And so delineating between what having that, big noise that stands out from all the rest, and that's
Hmm.
really how we win. So when there was sort of this emergency, which I don't like to think of this as an emergency because this is proactive communications, you want that major signal to be there so
Hmm.
that it's clear for your audience what you should be paying attention to. You don't have to tell them pay attention, but
Hmm.
you can artfully show them that there's an
Hmm.
absence of other things. And so that stands out. So that's what we
Right.
went to do. So reduce the noise and increase the signals you want them to see.
I love this. And I love that you took this from a scientific journal.
Thank you. I'm on here for email, but we're talking about gardening and we're talking about scientific journals.
Hey,
This is right
this
up my
is,
alley.
this the E in STEM stands for email. Don't people know?
Gosh, Day, you've just illuminated something that I have been wondering for years. So I think also what has driven this as well that I'll just add in this idea, um, you know, I came across this quote years ago and it has stuck with me talking about quotes. And it's Da Vinci's, I think Da Vinci said it. It's simplicity is the ultimate
Hmm.
sophistication.
Hmm.
And that really, I thought to myself, when we write things, and you probably talk about this a lot. When we write things, it's easier to overwrite. And
Yeah.
kind of like what you said about the 140 characters, when you have to
Yeah.
channel it down into the most basic information, that becomes really sophisticated and really challenging. So that was sort of my charge. Like, how do we get everybody on board with this new direction?
So not only is that your charge, but I think that's the biggest question we all have in higher ed because what you're saying, I mean, I think it's not who is going to disagree. Of course, we want one single source of truth. We want one thing that people are going to pay attention to. But I'll tell you, like, over time, all the people I've worked with, like, it's impossible. We can't make it happen. And so this is why you're here
Hmm.
because you're going to tell us exactly how.
Yeah.
Um, so I love that idea of simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. I agree with that so much. It's so much more work and it's so much
Hmm.
more beautiful when we can do things simply.
Hmm.
So how did you make this happen?
This was not a typical project. This was not So normally in higher ed, as we know, when you have a problem, you seek a solution.
Hmm.
At the point, like the emails were fine. They weren't great, but it wasn't like broken. It wasn't like we
Hmm.
don't have something, so we need to fix it. So I kind of worked, I wouldn't say under the radar, but more of like informally.
Hmm.
And it was a really busy time at the time. We were doing a big redesign of our flagship college at harvard.edu. We were working on a messaging toolkit. We were working on, we had a big video for that we were collaborating with our admissions team. So there wasn't a ton of time. So I thought to myself, I'm just going to start a listening tour. I'm going to go out to lunch and coffees with like faculty, staff, students, get to know them, like
Hmm.
informally ask them about like, what do you think of the emails? Did you read that email? Sort of,
Hmm.
how do you get your communication? And just building relationships and networking was super fun to get to know what people are
Hmm.
interested in and where they're coming from. And at Harvard, there are so many people from around the country, around the world, different lenses, different perspectives. And I have to say,
Hmm.
it was such a fun thing to do. So even if you don't need a project like this, like just go do listening tours with people as communicators, because I think that
Yeah.
overall it really helped me sort of see from a different lens, from
Yeah.
different levels of students, students who are interested, the STEM students versus the arts and humanities concentrators. It was really informative just in communications overall and what they're looking for. And then I
Hmm.
use this. So it was kind of like a qualitative market research, but
Hmm.
without any rigid framework. And I use this anecdotal evidence to understand the scope of like the email thorns, if you will,
Hmm.
and inform the approach that I kind of drew out.
I mean, I feel like everything starts with research. This is such a smart way to do this. Plus, you weren't just doing research, you were building relationships so that when you then came back and changed something, you'd have the buy-in. So very, very
Thank
smart.
you. Thank
So,
you.
okay, what did you learn in the listening tour?
Yeah, so I think a big thing about this was that, the students were just feeling a barrage of emails and they didn't know where to turn their attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of the takeaway message. I think also what I heard from faculty is that they wanted to know what was happening in the world of students and,
Mm-hmm.
that would inform their efforts as well. I think staff too.
Mm-hmm.
So we still send, our weekly update newsletter to staff as well. Parents see it who want to subscribe and things like that. So I think just the knowledge, just not this information hoarding, but sort of like it's there if people want to see it
Mm-hmm.
and want to know was the underlying factor. It was like they just wanted to feel included. They wanted to know what's
Yeah.
going on. And that was just, I mean, from a human level and community and connection level, that made so much sense.
I feel like we should take this, write it down, and make it just step by step something people can just do. This is amazing. So what you're talking about, you doing a listening tour, were you in this alone? Like, what is this you and a team, or like, talk to me about how you made this actually happen?
This wasn't a project that we scoped out or added to the budget like a
Mm-hmm.
normal like redesign or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So I would call it maybe a passion project of like, I know
Mm-hmm.
there's this problem. I'd love to solve it. Administratively, it's a burden. Audience wise, it's a burden. And so from there, I drew it out by hand. I think that, I come from, I come
You're an
from the era.
artist.
I wouldn't call my chicken scratch art. So I have these big pieces of paper in my office because I just love drawing things out because it helps me visualize it differently from a screen. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
I'm limited in my, I'm no pro in any of this design, but with a pencil, I can chicken scratch my way to something beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the fall of 2019, we're a small but mighty team, a handful of people, and I was just kind of mentioning to them, and one colleague in particular, she was amazing, and she saw it sort of on my wall, and it was I had drawn it out with a pencil, erased, crossed things out, kind of like again simplicity. It's easy to make something complex, and it was kind of like the easiest thing. I had it on my wall, and it was kind of there to remind me like you need to get this done at some point, but
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not going to launch it for another year because we have too many
Mm-hmm.
competing priorities. She's this incredible colleague. She's brilliant with design. And she said, let me help you with that. That would
Yeah.
actually help us decrease email too in the Dean of Students office. And I think overall, like this would actually be a boon for everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, teamwork.
Yeah.
So she grabbed it and she said, let me design it. So by like December, January, we had a rough draft in our email client of this template.
Awesome.
And it was like probably one of the easiest projects until we had to get buy-in, right? I think that then you have this idea, you have this concept, and now you need to
Mm-hmm.
get buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And that was going to be the uphill battle.
So two things there. One, talk about the power of manifesting. You drew this thing, you put it on your wall, and it manifested. Oh my God.
Oh,
I'm gonna put up like a news item or newspaper article that says I won $60 million.
it's funny that you say this because I didn't intentionally manifest it. I think that it was more like but you're right. I did because I put it up there and I said, this is the dream, right? This is where we want to
Yeah.
go with
And
this.
someone else saw it. And if you hadn't done that, they wouldn't have.
Right. And it was a meeting. I mean, I had mentioned it off the cuff, like, and I'm big at like putting stuff up on my walls, like more so when we are in the office, much more because
Mm-hmm.
I'll be
Mm-hmm.
thinking about something and I'll be like writing an email. I don't know if you do this too, but like you'll come up with this idea out of like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the thinking without thinking. And so I'll be writing another email and I'm like, oh, that would be a good idea for that project. So it's almost like a parking lot of ideas where I just like go write it
Yeah.
up.
The second thing is you're talking about December 2019, January 2020, and we all know what happened next. So
Right.
talk to me about that. So, you were trying to get buy-in, but then suddenly the world shuts down.
There was a huge silver lining in this in retrospect. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
say that, what is that quote? You never waste a good crisis. And
Never.
so
Yeah.
as terrible as it was, and having a degree in biology and virology myself, like it was a moment of, I
Oof.
was glued to reading everything and thinking like, you know, but even before we sent the students home, I remember going to the office and telling people, like, this is serious. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading the reports. Like, we need to start planning communications. I didn't think immediately that this would be such a critical tool once we were
Mm-hmm.
sort of hybrid off campus and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
when it came down to it, when students went home, and I remember, like, around the time, I remember there's like a Friday the 13th where sort of
Mm-hmm.
the world fell apart. And I think
Mm-hmm.
today is a Friday the 13th as well. So very
Oh my
apropos.
God.
um, but let's knock on wood here. But I think that, when COVID hit, it was an opportunity to say, in this moment, how can we be nimble? And higher ed is not typically nimble. It is not a Miami Vice boat. It is a cruise ship.
Mm-hmm.
And turning a cruise ship, as you know, takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if you've talked to other people about this, but big projects, like getting that buy-in, getting the
Mm-hmm.
stakeholders. And so we had one or two meetings at this point, kind of letting them know it was in the works, letting them know it was going to be next fall that we wanted to sort of introduce this, roll it out. We had this whole plan ready.
Mm-hmm.
And we were working on getting buy-in and talking about how it was going to be sort of this pilot year, and we were going to shift and figure out what worked and didn't work and continue to revisit as needed for the community. But we realized that, we needed it. And so as
Mm-hmm.
students went remote and as students then went hybrid after that, like, it became this tool that kept
Mm-hmm.
our community together and also kept this like single point of truth for information when it was coming at us from so many directions. So when we
Mm-hmm.
had big announcements, it was just this really wonderful tool to have. So we took advantage of the moment. And I have to say that, like, we have an incredible leadership, great trust. Buy-in would have been relatively easy for us because, like you said, those relationships
Yeah.
that not only I had built, but our team has built.
Yeah.
And so they were getting on board for the next fall. They were excited. And I think that we were to the point where we were sort of shaping what people needed, and
Yeah.
tweaking it in that regard. So it kind of was serendipitous, sadly, but
It sort of is. And like, you had no idea, but the fact that you had done all that prep already, like you were so ready for this moment in
mhm,
time and like really serving your community.
mhm.
So what was in the email? What did you draw in that chicken scratch template?
Harkening back to simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
it had a header photo,
Mm-hmm.
it had a title, and then it had an organized list of one sentences and like a link out. So nothing lived. I always get frustrated when things live in emails
Mm-hmm.
and you can't find it or you can't open a link or you can't learn more because
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to. I have trouble reading through and sifting through so much information in an email, and they get so
Mm-hmm.
long. So that was sort of my dream, was like a one or two sentence link off. So gave you enough information to link off to somewhere else. And really, because it was COVID, we had important announcements at the top.
Right.
So the community knew what the big announcement for the week was as well. I also had this dream of having these like seasonal photos. So coming from the West Coast, we do have seasons, but it's not the same as like the New England fall. And so I had these like visions of like winter photos and fall photos. And I had all these like notes about, this is how the photos would change. The photos change sporadically now, and we have photo contests with our students, and there's a lot of other things. But that was sort of the intention originally, was to like
Yeah.
be so like structured, and now it's very nimble, which I love. So
Yeah. So, okay, critical announcement, seasonal photo. What's the rest of the content? How do you curate it? How do you determine what goes in there in terms of what you think might be relevant? Who checks it? That kind of thing.
we have a form, and we accept community
Oh,
submissions.
great.
And
Mm-hmm.
we have like a rules around, or I should say like best practices and policies
Yeah.
around who can submit. So, somebody just can't randomly submit from way across the country who's not affiliated with what we do. So we try and, facilitate that, funnel the content properly. The content is neutral and inclusive, and
Mm-hmm.
we abide by the same policies for everybody. So there's fair
Mm-hmm.
treatment across, and it's equitable and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. We have student workers, and they are incredible
Awesome.
helping with this content. I think that also from the get-go was really important for us to include our audience in this to help us shape what works and
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Actually,
And
yeah,
that,
that's
like,
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, not only are they tremendous workers and incredible, they also just have a different lens than I do, and our team does, and that's been really helpful. So,
Hmm.
submissions are due a couple days before. And the initial assumptions, my assumption was that they'd want this on like a Monday or Tuesday. And I was worried that our team would have to work on the weekend. So I thought, oh, Tuesday would work. Turns out students love it at the end of the week. So they like
Yeah.
it before the weekend. And that's when they open it more. That's when they can digest it more. And so we have continual focus groups and feedback. And we welcome like on our submission form, we also have a feedback form for the longest time. So
Cool. Yeah.
um, we always gather, just we're very open to being nimble and
Yeah.
adjusting based on as you know, students change over time. So the students that were here 4 years ago aren't the same students as our incoming students. So we want to continue
True.
to evolve to meet the needs of them.
So it goes weekly, right? Weekly toward the end of the week. Is that? Yeah.
Weekly towards the end of the week right now. It could always change based on new information on what's going to be
Right.
best for the community. Yep.
And do you have like a limit on how many stories go in each one of these emails? Like, or are they just sometimes shorter, sometimes longer?
So they're sometimes very short and we still send
Yeah.
them. Sometimes they're very
Yeah.
long. And so, this week was a really long version. And so we're looking at, we're identifying ways to simplify the writing and make it very clear about what is what, for students to easily
Hmm.
open it and go through it. So we continue to do
Hmm.
tweaks with that because it's gotten so popular that we have a lot of great stuff in it, and we don't want students to glaze over because it is too long. So that's definitely an area where we continue to evolve and evaluate.
Yeah. And I just started, my son is 6. He turned 6 yesterday as of when I'm recording this. I've
Congratulations.
started to get his, thank you. I've started to get his weekly updates from his school, which he started 2 weeks ago. And it's nice. I'm so glad the principal takes the time. Like he even records the email in audio in case parents want to listen to it
Wow.
that way. But one of the things he does that I'm like, sir, please, he repeats stories. So we've gotten 3 emails right now, and it's like there's each one has had at least half of the content be a repeat from the previous 2. I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
not like now I don't trust any of it on any of this. I'm not going to look at any of it because it all a repeat.
Hmm.
Oh my God. And I think you don't do
Yep.
that on purpose, right? You don't repeat.
Um, on purpose. So it's funny that you say that because our principal did the same thing, and I think that enough parents. So we have a new principal
Oh,
now, but our principal for our elementary school, who's just phenomenal. I miss her dearly. She retired, but she would bold the old content and not like or she would bold the new. She would bold one of the contents, and
oh
she'd say at the
man.
top, "New content is bolded" or something like that. So you knew what was the new content and was the old content, and I really appreciated that. But we took it a step further, and we said we're not going to repeat anything because people
No.
save emails if they want to read it. They can go back to an email.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, I think that there's a couple things where we might put in, the open of the survey. A survey is open for we have different things that students need to fill out for surveys that, whether it's,
Yeah.
a pulse survey or something like that. So we'll usually say that this is the closest we get to repeating, but we'll say the survey is open and then the deadline is next week or the deadline is in 2 days. So that's kind of the closest we get to a repeat, is just identifying that a deadline is upcoming, approaching quickly. But otherwise, we don't. I mean, it's once in a blue moon we'll repeat something because it's important for an announcement or something like that. And otherwise, we don't do that. And we found that
Hmm.
that has helped readership. And that actually was something directly from our students, because they said
Hmm.
that similar to how you feel, like
Hmm.
they felt like they couldn't trust. They were like, why am I reading this again? I already read this last week. So it diminishes their interest in it quite quickly.
Yeah, honestly, please don't repeat. Please don't do it.
I know.
I love that.
I know.
So smart. So far, I'm like, this is great. I feel like I can do this, but there's 2 probably big hurdles that people might be thinking, those who are listening. One is, well, great. I'm not going to have, like, hopefully there will not be another pandemic, so I can just make this happen really fast.
Hmm.
Or how do you actually get people to get on board with this, right? So what were
Hmm.
some of the challenges, maybe that you had yourself, or the challenges that someone would have trying to do this today? And like, what's your advice to people who might want to try this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that so I, being the scientist, I like to lead with data and justifications and
Mm-hmm.
information. And so for me, that's really helpful. What I did in the beginning was sort of an asset inventory, and I asked across
Mm-hmm.
the college what emails were going out to students from everyone. And that was illuminating how we were somewhat
Mm-hmm.
coordinated, but students would receive so many emails, particularly incoming students over the summer, which was an area that we fixed
Mm-hmm.
quite quickly, and their
Mm-hmm.
team was incredible, and we worked together, and that was what we did first. So we found like the
Mm-hmm.
first year incoming students got a handful of emails each, and we thought, let's put that into a newsletter and let's test. This is separate from the weekly update. That was sort of like we did that with them and we saw some results. So we saw something small in a smaller population, not all students. If you have an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to try something on a small scale, or do an asset inventory and say,
Yes.
how many emails are we actually sending to students or whatever audience or population you have? And then say, okay, well, these three emails could be one email, or these all could be in. So you started to see patterns of
Right.
what went out when. And I did it by month, not by week, because that would have been too much. But you see some months, it was like this laundry list. And you're like, well, that could have all been
Right.
in a newsletter. So that was really informative. And then also just really building relationships. That really takes buy-in, because when you have a few successes, they build on one another. We also approach. So our plan was going to be approaching this as a pilot to provide data and information for what works. And so for us, usually at Harvard, if you're going to try something out, they're very open to that. And we're going to try it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we can tweak, revisit, go back to what worked. So we were going to, and we still approached it as a pilot for the first year. We didn't outwardly call it like beta or pilot or anything like that, but calling it a pilot made it less stressful, like it had to
Right.
be perfect out of the gates.
Right.
Um, and it implies future evolution to see what meets the needs, but also you'll get a lot
Mm-hmm.
of data from that quote unquote pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Mm-hmm.
can take that back to leadership and say, this is what's working. And we found immediately that we had data to give them about
Mm-hmm.
who was open rates and click rates and all of that. And so turning around and showing that immediately was really informative, not only just to gain buy-in initially, but then for anybody who didn't really want to go in the newsletter right away, which was minimal for us. But I think if you have people who are kind of holdouts and they're like, well, we'll send our own email,
Yeah.
because it happens, then they see that maybe their open rates aren't as good and your open rates are better, and
Yeah.
they want to join the bandwagon. So
I
that's
mean,
great.
why wouldn't you? Of course. Also, it's less
Yeah.
work for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
absolutely. I mean,
awesome.
writing a blurb and submitting it to our form is much simpler than doing your whole separate email, putting that together, curating a list. I mean, it's leagues easier.
It is. And I love this idea of always start with a test, start with a pilot, show the data. The data speaks for itself. That is what's enticing. And once people start seeing those results, you'd have to actually be very irrational to not want to be a part of it, right? Or to stray from it.
Yeah.
So, okay. We've spent quite some time talking about how you made this happen, where it came from, some of these challenges, but I know people have held on until this very moment because we want to talk about the results.
Mm-hmm.
So, what have you seen? So, it's been a few years now, and I'm sure you've iterated and evolved. What sorts of results have you seen?
I like to kind of think about absences of things too. So not just like what's working, but sort of like there's an absence of too many emails now, which is great. At least 30% of the emails that we used to send, these we call them one-off emails,
Mm-hmm.
are gone. Likely much higher, because now there's more information that we put in the newsletter that didn't reach the level of a single email, or people didn't want to send it in a
Oh,
single email.
yeah.
So I think that there's at least 30% less email to our
Wow.
community, which is pretty incredible, I
Yeah.
think. It might be higher. It's hard to gauge that.
Yeah.
But just based on the asset management that we had, that was great.
Yeah.
Um, and also, something that I really love is that when our leadership sends emails now, they have around the same open rate as the weekly update, because now you have the big signal of the weekly, but when the blips pop up that are important, from like, you can strategically use a voice of a dean, you can
Mm-hmm.
strategically use a voice of a leader. And when they see that leader in their inbox, they know it's important. If it rose to the level of them sending it themselves, they're going to pay attention to it. And that was also really
That is
helpful.
so cool. That is exactly what was in the article. It's a different
Yes.
noise. I
Yes.
love it.
So they see it. So we've been able to strategically use, I mean, a big question I have is, if we have to send an email, like who is going to sign it? Who's the author? Who's the audience? What's the
Hmm.
goal? What's the purpose? And so, we have a lot of best practices where how we approach this. And, it's really exciting to have a student base who are engaged with us on this level, and also continue to give us feedback, which for me, that's the most important. If we aren't doing a great job, I want to know about it. I want to be able
Hmm.
to address that. So, yes, each year we work to improve little aspects that we hear about, and we can consistently get feedback,
Hmm.
and we test ideas. And I think most of all, it's fluid and it's nimble, and we have support of this amazing team and our incredible leadership. So I am just deeply grateful for all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I hinted at the open rates at the beginning too, but talk to us about that. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it depends on sort of what's happening and what's going on. But typically at the beginning of the term, it'll be anywhere from 85 to 92% open rates. At the end of the year, it kind of trickles out. Seniors, sometimes don't seem to be as interested, especially if we send, sometimes we'll have to send one after graduation, and obviously they're not
Right.
engaged with us anymore. So, it will drop closer to, 80%. But I think overall, they know that if it rises to, or I hope they know that if it rises to the level of inclusion in the weekly update, it's important enough to take a peek at.
That's just incredible, truly. These are the open rates people dream of.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Yes,
feel very fortunate that we have such an engaged community. It's really inspiring.
it is. But you're also treating them with so much respect, right? Like this all was born from respecting their time and their attention and their inbox. And like you're
Hmm.
getting that in return, you know?
Hmm.
What sort of anecdotal feedback have you gotten to in addition to these incredible metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall, like the groups of listening to our um, colleagues and friends and students and staff and faculty, I think they've all just been extremely happy with being able to be informed
Hmm.
overall. I personally, something that really gives me joy is, within the root of our mission at Harbor College is this transformative experience. And I
Hmm.
think my favorite part of this is the curiosity of our students. And so we've had student workers or other students that I hear, that I've advised in the past. And instead of a curated algorithm like an Amazon telling you what you should look at, you've looked at this, so you've looked at that.
Hmm.
I've had students come up to me, or, I'm having coffee with them, and they'll say, "Hey, I want to join this new experience with health and wellness and promotion group," or "I checked out this other, opportunity because I saw it in the weekly, and normally I
Oh,
wouldn't have
cool.
looked at that."
Yeah.
And so it's moved beyond this importance of sort of like numbers and open rates into this transformative experience
Yeah.
and supporting our mission, and then unique ways that students are having this curiosity and exploring and seeing something that maybe they wouldn't have looked at that one off email about the topic, but here it was next to something they were really interested in. And so they said, "Oh, there's
Oh,
that
man.
talk. I'm going to go check it out." So hearing these
Oof.
anecdotal stories of students, being able to, be the future citizens and citizen leaders of our, country and world, and having engaging in other topics, not just things they're interested in, but things that might be important for their futures, that's just thrilling to me. I just really love that.
This is the dream. You have created the dream. Like I work with so many schools who like they have incredible programming for their students, but
Hmm.
the students don't know about it. And part of the problem is too many signals, right? It's not a
Hmm.
lack of interest, it's too many signals. And you've created a vessel, a vehicle that they trust. They trust what's in the weekly. And
Hmm.
so they're going to look at it and they're going to think it's right for them. It's just incredible what you've accomplished, you and your
Thank
team,
you.
Alex.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, as we're on the topic of team, I have to give a huge acknowledgement to the college communications team, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences
Hmm.
communication team. There is a small but mighty team behind this. Our student workers throughout the years, like they continue to make this success possible through creativity, resilience, this commitment to improvement. Like, they have taken my initial chicken scratch and they have put it into places that I couldn't have dreamed of. And like, there are things that people will like, feedback that they'll give, or even the team will say like, actually, I didn't like that. And I think that having a team where you can be like vulnerable and be creative and critique everyone, like I am very much into, it's not just my idea, but I'm going to throw something out there, and together we're going to make something that really works well, and it's to the benefit of our community, audience included, for our students. And so that's what's really been exciting for me, is this group that we work together, and it's been unifying not only for our team but for the community. And it's so fun to have something that brings us together, that we do. It's like this well-oiled machine, and we have this responsibility, right? This commitment to our community to do a good job and give them the information in a way that's not wasting their time and helpful. So that's really exciting as well.
Absolutely love it. And I agree with you completely. What an incredible accomplishment. Like, I'm sure people listening right now are like, I need to see these emails. Like, I want to reach out. If they do want to see the emails and want to get to know kind of more specifics from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn. I think you might put it in the show notes there.
Yes.
So please check that out. I love connecting with community. I'm presenting at, High Ed Web, a poster session as well. I'm really excited. I just think that communication with each other, particularly in an environment where, the world is very challenging. And so I just love connecting with people and helping others. And that's really something that's been a commitment across my career, and particularly at Harvard College as well.
That's amazing. Well, you heard it, folks. Reach out to Alix. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And that's the end of today's episode. To our listeners out there, follow and subscribe to keep walking the walk and talking the tactics. The Talking Tactics podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions pros find their next big idea, and feature a selection of the industry's bests as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Jenny Lee Fowler, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed too. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Check them out at element451.com.